Janet Sharkis is an executive director. She has been in a number of different areas. She has over 15 years of leadership experience in social enterprise organizations in roles such as executive and development director. She is also a licensed counselor who has trained and coached hundreds of professionals to improve their effectiveness. Among her special areas of expertise are people with disabilities, cross-systems collaborations, public policy, collective impact, and community planning. Most recently, she worked as the industry expert on nonprofit and government agencies at a software company. She holds a master's in counseling, a bachelor's in special ed, a certificate of advanced graduate studies from Columbia University School of Business and Executive Nonprofit Leadership. Launchpad Job Club has been a major success factor in her career, a boost to her life. We count her as one of our dearest friends, Janet Sharkis. She's going to be talking to you about, I missed that, motivational interviewing. So let's give a warm Launchpad welcome to Janet Sharkis.
Thank you. You're so kind. So great to be with you today. I've been in your shoes. When I first started to talk to Shannon about doing this, I had a job, and I was, mentoring someone else who was not employed, and then I lost my job, and here I was in this weird situation of planning this, and since then I have found a job. So it's been a weird, exciting process that I'm hoping that my lost job situation enriches my ability to do this well. As I go through today, we're going to talk about motivation and kind of the underlying emotional impact of losing your job and how it all connects, and how you can utilize your strengths to move forward. And again, as Kathy mentioned, getting with someone to be your mentor or your collaborator or getting a team, I don't just recommend that for job search. I recommend that for career. We all need someone on our team to help us and to point out the stuff that maybe we're not thinking about, give us ideas, just be there for us, because can be a very lonely place. As we go through this, please, I've been to these trainings and some things are useful and some things are not. If there's anything that's not useful, just disregard it. And if there's any time you need to, please, I welcome interruptions. This is for you, not for me. And so let's just go to the next slide. And again, feel free to interrupt. Interrupt's not even the right word. Join in. Paul, could you switch to the next slide? So this is a little bit about me again. I have a picture of my cat. My cat is, I have two cats that are actually sitting here right now. And my cat is really one of my, mascots and cheerleaders, because he's never laid anybody off. He's never given anybody a hard time. And, he just purrs and is nice. So I think when we're going through all this, we need to draw on all of our resources and all of our help. And so this is my Dylan. And we all need our mascots.
Yes. He's beautiful.
Thank you. Paul, can we switch? Okay, so I don't really, I kind of view this more as a personal quest than just a job seeking, because there's so much internal work that goes on when you're trying to find a new job. There is, what's my environment like? What are the people around me like? What is my, do I do things to make my environment better or not? How do we feel physically? What are our social connections? What are our spiritual connections and needs? What are we feeling and what is our self-talk? And some of that can be, there's all clues, even the stuff we don't like are clues to help us figure out what is the best match for us. What is the best, there's so many decisions to be made. Like, how long do I wait to find my ideal job? What is my ideal job now? Is it the same as when I left last time? Do I want the same job as last time? Are there things that are bringing me to a new place than where I was? Does that make sense? What I find is what you resist persists. What you work through does indeed help you. And even though that may sound like a silly catchphrase, when you're resisting something, when something is like bugging you, tune into it and you learn about yourself, and it helps you to figure out what's best for you. Did anybody have any thoughts or questions? Or
I have 2 prescriptions at HEB.
I hear someone who's probably wants to mute themselves about the prescriptions. Okay, that's the, Paul, could you switch on to the next one? Oh, the dreaded resolutions. So, as we look at the success factors and detractor factors of what were our resolutions and what made us successful and what did not, what detracted from our success. For instance, think about your last resolution. And I want you to think about, on a scale of 1 to 10, write down for me, how important was that change to you? If 10 being the highest. The second one, how confident were you that you could make that change? Scale of 1 to 10. Now, go back to the, and how many, what did we get for those numbers? Can anybody put in the chat or tell me what their numbers were and the importance?
Do you want like on a 1 to 5 scale or
Yeah, what was
something?
your importance level? Like, how important was that change for you?
And the first one was how important was it? And the second one
The
was
second one,
what?
how confident were you in making that change? Now, I want you to think about whether or not you made the change and what those numbers looked like to you. 10 and 10. And Chris? Anybody else? Importance 4, confidence 2. Okay. All right, now think about if the number wasn't a 10, what could have made that number higher? And why wasn't it lower? These questions can help you unpack your motivation. They can help you look at, there are reasons why we break our resolutions. A lot of times it's because we don't look at our opposite motivation to stay the same, motivation to not make said change. Changing for a new job is in many ways as big as changing to a new home or finding a new partner. It brings up thousands of emotions and experiences. So does things like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. That brings up a lot of emotions for people, and they're often, that's a common resolution. It's about your sense of self. It's about your, health, or maybe it's about your physical presentation. All of this has emotions that are packed into this. And in just like in the same way, getting a new job or finding a new career path is not just about getting a good resume. It's about unpacking this internal work. And then we live in an environment where it's expected that, and I've heard this, and I'm sure you have, anyone could find a job today. There are tons of jobs out there. People are just lazy. They don't really want to work. everyone is just, silently quitting. And that can be really demoralizing. All these feelings, thoughts, and ideas are involved when we think of change. Change can be very scary, threatening, exciting. There's a lot of stuff around change for us. Could you do the next slide? Okay. So when I think about the presidential campaigns, Barack Obama's thing was about change, right? Hope, change. That was a theme. And then Trump's was about make America great again. And the reason they choose these themes is because they have very deep feelings for us all. They bring up the senses of nostalgia or comfort or fears or hopes and dreams all at once. Oftentimes we are not maximizing what we can do, even though we know it's important to do. For instance, we all know, we've been told, Kathy has certainly taught this, Shannon has taught this, that the most important thing we need to do is network, right? What is it, Kathy? 90% of the jobs are found through networking?
70 to 80 is usually
70.
what the statistic I see.
All right. And how many of us spend 70 to 80% of our time doing the networking? Why? We know it's intellectually, we know that, And when I was listening to Kathy earlier, I was thinking about all of the blockers I had when she gave that advice before for me of why I wasn't following that advice. Most of it I did, and then I found out all of it was good and why each thing was so important. But why wasn't I following all that? It's a lot about our motivation. It's about our ability to change. And it's about our feelings of loss when we have lost a job. So I don't know why this looks differently on the screen, but the stages of change are preconception, contemplation, preparation, action, and then maintenance. And most of us are always cycling through these different stages. Even in the same day, we're cycling through these changes. And in some area, we might be in the preparation. In other areas of the job search, we may be just in the preconception. For instance, I might say, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But that idea that Kathy said about getting a second email address just for my jobs, I'm not doing that. I don't, why do I need to do that? But it's there. I know the idea is there, but I'm not doing that idea yet. I'm not acting on that idea. It's just there. So we cycle through this, and it's important to just pay attention to where we are so we can identify our blockers, and we can identify why we're feeling what we're feeling and what we're doing with it. Understanding where you are in the stages of change can help you unlock your blockers and move forward. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or observations? Paul? Here is a really important piece to what we're going through. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The stages of grief and loss. There's so many pieces of this emotional experience of losing a job. When we think about our job loss, there are a ton of things that are lost in this, besides what most people just associate with, yeah, you don't have a job. It's far more complex than that. Can anyone name some things that are losses for us? Obvious things and non-obvious things are more than welcome.
Confidence.
Yeah. And self-esteem. talk about freedom. I'm going to talk about freedom. I'd like you to share that, and health.
Yeah, definitely. I hope you can see me. So the freedom is basically to do whatever you want. Sometimes because of the circumstances, looking for a job, you're depressed, going through grief, you tend to be less motivated, and you feel like you're stuck. You can't do things that you want to do. For example, you stop working out, you stop walking, you stop going to the gym, you stop going out, and you just get stuck, and you want to be by yourself, and you're not really yourself.
And so to me, like, that is really powerful. The concept that we don't feel free. That's like we feel oppressed. And sure, I feel like friends, social community, your friends at work. Most of us have relationships at work that now we won't be interacting with some of the people the way that we did before. What else have we got?
I think health is a big one, that you don't know how much stress impacts your health and your money, income. Sometimes you don't eat as well. You don't take as good care of yourself. But stress is just has a huge impact on so many aspects of health. I think it's a biggie.
Yeah, anxiety. Yeah. It's interesting you say that, Kathy, because my dad, when lost his job, got a new, and it was a huge thing in my family. He was, my dad had like a third grade education. So when he lost his job, he was 57. And we didn't know what was going to be. And he was the sole provider for the family. And a year later, he got cancer and died. And I think the anxiety, like the whole family was gripped in this terrified. I remember feeling like that when I was a kid, that what is going to happen to us? And then sometimes people are supportive of you and sometimes they're not. I mean, when I lost my job, I have an 18 and a 21-year-old, and sometimes they weren't all that. They're so into their own self, that their own world at that age, it can be really hard. Kathy's listed a great one, a sense of identity, a sense of self. Like, what's the first thing people say to you when they meet you? So what do you do? Where do you work? And well, gee, I don't have a job. I remember I had to go to a big party, unemployed, and how hard it was for me. And then I remember one time I mentioned, I was out with my kids, and I talked about being out of a job. I was going to the grocery store, and my daughter was like, "Don't say that out loud."
Wow.
She was ashamed that her mom was unemployed. And it was just really interesting. So, and then when we think about this cheerful talk about these losses, as we accumulate personal, professional, and cultural losses, like what's going on in the country, what's going on with my family, all of these things interact with us. And a lot of times, if you have a loss that wasn't resolved before, this is one of the things that hit me. As Kathy mentioned earlier, this is like my third layoff that I experienced. And even though, oh, by the way, you're laid off, but just through no fault of your own, and we have just disconnected your Slack and your email. And you feel like saying, giving them some gesture that they may not like. And I know it's not their fault. And I could sit there and I could think about how unfair it was, how crappy it was, look at the way they laid me off. And is there something wrong with me? Like, how many times can I say that I've gotten laid off multiple times and it wasn't about me? And I think, it's just like when someone has a tragedy in their life and It can seem personal, and a lot of times you want to blame yourself and own it because that gives you a sense of power. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these things that happen to us, we don't have the power over. I know people who've done all the right things and crappy things have happened. How many of you know people who were total idiots who got great jobs, great promotions? Is there anyone here who does not know both of those situations? Okay, big no one, right? Every single person knows people in those situations, but yet we want to blame ourselves because it gives us a sense of power. And yeah, there are things you could do to try to insulate yourself. There are things you could do to make sure you're always job ready next time. You're always keeping yourself still fresh looking. But there are things that happen. And the very funny thing is the last training I did in my previous job was for executive directors. And it was how to survive as what it's like to be an executive director. And it was supposed to be for executive directors during this economic downturn. And I ended it with, you could do everything right and it could still come out wrong, and you do everything wrong and it still can come out right. But what you can walk away from is a sense of yourself and pride in your work and pride in what you've done to lift other people up. Yeah, so that's true. Everyone does deserve a good house and a good job and food, and absolutely true. Even the people who are not the best at their work, absolutely, completely agree, John. I feel like those values have sometimes been lost. But there's an unfairness about the process that sometimes we get stuck in, and that can clog up our ability to move forward. Next slide, please. So these two things are like living next to each other. And these are two things that I've picked out. I'm sure there's a bunch of other things that are going on in your life that are also next to each other. One is the stages of grief, and the other are the stages of change. And each one is, as you could imagine, touching the other. So, for instance, maybe if I'm too much in the denial stage of losing my job, which does happen, or I'm so angry, I am struggling with that anger and the unfairness, and gee, what if I did this or that? All of those things can impact, make it harder for me to move and to take action. And they're also depressing, right? They're the same things that impact our health. I remember when I was unemployed, which was like literally a week ago, the hardest part of my day was getting out of bed. Just facing another day being unemployed was very, very hard for me. Sometimes it's easier to find ways to get yourself out, and sometimes it's harder, and some days are harder, and that's okay. But we're always cycling through these different sections. It's important to give yourself a little bit of space to process these feelings. And sometimes I literally try to assign a time of day. So today I have an hour to cry at 6 o'clock. But not, I'm going to give myself that time. Or today I'm going to be angry for a while, and then I'm going to do my best to move past it and write down all my angry things and do all the stuff that I need to process it. Because grief can actually be good for us, because it helps us to clue in to what we need and what we want to avoid in our next job. It helps us to get in touch with ourselves. So it's not a terrible thing. It's just not fun. So I'm really believing good grief, and not just from Charlie Brown. Can I have the next slide? Okay, so there's the first stage, there's a stage of, as we mentioned, really not moving forward at all. And I moved on to stage 2, and stage 2 is what I call the fixing to stage. So I'm fixing to work on my resume. I'm fixing to look, do some outreach on LinkedIn, update my LinkedIn, profile, and we all have struggles with these things. So these are things that are often really difficult for us to kind of move on. Maybe we're afraid of making the wrong decision. Like, what if I take the wrong job? And what if I lose my job again? Should I go into something that is more, what's the safest path for me? How important is that for me? So sometimes this feeling of ambivalence can be really helpful to us, because it's a process, what we're dealing with, but on the other hand, it can really slow us down. During this time, if you're working with somebody or have a friend going through this, sometimes it helps to look at the past in a positive way and say, when you've gone through tough transitions in your life before, what has helped you? What has kept you back? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a job loss. What were your success factors? And they're very different from each person. So some people's success factor is good self-talk. They have to say positive things about themselves. Does anyone have things that you could think about from your past that you could list that helped you, not through the job loss thing, but from other transitions in your life that helped you?
I think having people support a support group or support people that encourage you and support your actions and that sort of thing. Somebody to just talk with who are encouraging makes a huge difference in any kind of life transition.
It's interesting you say that, because in terms of grief and loss, the sense of aloneness is one of the hardest parts of it, and having that connection. I mean, we're social animals. We need our pack, just like our pets, our dogs and cats. We need our people. And having that connection. And a lot of times when you're unemployed, you lose a lot of connections. You are at home and alone, and it takes a lot of effort because you're probably depressed and you got to, getting out is so much harder than it had been, but it can be so helpful, especially if that has helped you before. Think about that, because those memories will allow you to make those steps. They'll allow you to get past that. Yeah, I know this is hard, but those connections before really helped me to get through X, Y, and Z. Does
I
anybody?
don't know if this is a hard and fast rule, but I have read it before that men tend to be less willing to do that, to socialize, to share, to reach out, and women, that's kind of what they do all the time when they're go through hard times, that they have their girlfriends from high school or whatever, and they still connect and share those feelings. And men tend to self-isolate more. And I'm sure that it's not across the board, all males and all females, but at any rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's often true. I think there's a whole factor. There's cultural overtones too. Like if you're raised in a family or raised in a culture where there's more shame to being unemployed or feelings of that, those things are messages that sometimes impact you. And I think that sometimes there are different messages for men and women about socializing, especially under these circumstances. Does anybody have other success factors that helped them through difficult times, not necessarily a job search, but a difficult transition? Because you remember, you're making a change and you've had lots of changes. What helped you before? No, no one wants to share
I'll tell
with
you, I'll tell you one that job seekers have told me in the past. They set a goal, like a physical goal, especially where they say, I'm gonna run a 5K or something like that, where you set a goal that you're in charge of, you're empowered. It can even be a goal that is connected to your health, but something that nobody else controls. And so you succeed, and it helps to build up your self-esteem. And
Mhm.
so anyway, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in identifying the smallest possible win. So maybe I'm not doing, because I tend to be hard on myself. It's the way I was raised. Whatever, I'll blame my family. Why not? They're not going to complain. But I have to really intentionally say, okay, I did this today that was better. And it could be I got out of bed 10 minutes earlier than the last time. I worked on my resume. I realized why it's so hard for me to do, for instance, I had trouble, I still haven't done this right. On my LinkedIn, I know I need a professional picture and I hate getting my picture taken. So why do you have trouble with this? Oh, it's because you were raised a certain way that my mom would always hide behind when there was pictures taken. It affects you. So being in touch with, but I did other things. Okay, I've done other things, but I know I have this blocker here. How am I going to get past that blocker? Does that make sense? All of those things can help you if you look at your success factors, count what you're doing well, and make sure that you are really owning that. You've got to, building your confidence and your sense of self is so important.
So
Yeah.
I have a suggestion. Thanks for letting me come in here.
Please.
When I moved to Austin, I used a technique that a lot of trainers use, and that is write separate ideas on sticky notes. And then I put them on the wall in an organized fashion because, I'm a creative person and I had 1,000 ideas in my head about how I was going to make the move and all the steps that I had to go through as far as, looking for a new home and all those things. And so I had literally 100 sticky notes. And then after I got them organized, I could say, okay, here's step 1. Here's step 2. And so I need to get these done first and most. And I think you could almost do that too with a job search, because you've got lots of ideas about the things that you need to do and what do you need to do first and most.
Yeah. I mean, all of those things that you've done that were your success factors before, draw on them because you already know they have worked for you. And when you know that, that helps you tremendously to say, you know what, like this time when I lost my job, as crappy as it was, well, at least it wasn't that long ago that I had been unemployed. And I know how to write a resume. I know how to update that pretty quickly. That was a success factor. Did it suck that I had lost my job so quickly after a year or so? It sucked, but it was a success factor as well. Doing something added and doing something you enjoy and not having much time to do when you're working full time. That was really helpful to me too. So I would take my dog for a walk in the park during the day. And I would never have had time to do that when I was working. And it's like, okay, I could find something positive about where I am. That can be very helpful in building your sense. You're like giving yourself some bright spot in your day. Like sometimes that's helpful to people. What did I do in the past when I was in a crappy place to build a bright spot in my life? Those success factors are so key. And just like when Kathy said earlier, writing down all of your jobs you've had and one key accomplishment, what's important about that is not just for what you write in a resume, it's important for yourself. It's important to take stock of what you've done well and watch your own pattern, because then that'll help you to say, these are the things I'm proudest about myself and my accomplishments. What can I do moving forward that builds on that? That gives you a sense of confidence, and building your confidence and your sense of self-sufficiency is so critical. And having people around you who also help you to do that is very helpful in this process. Can I have the next slide? Okay. Stage 3 is preparation. And again, this is just getting ready to, maybe it's thinking about your plan. You're beginning to, you're still feeling unstable and not really sure what you want to do. You may be feeling very frustrated, but you're working through it. You have made progress from stage 1 to stage 3. Even if you're not doing what people think you should be doing, you're no longer at stage 1 of just not really facing the situation. You're now getting ready to make a change. Maybe you're doing, researching or thinking about what kind of jobs do I really want to do. This is really important step, and it's important to, of course, make sure that you are taking stock of your success, even may not be where you exactly want it to be. All right, next slide, please. All right, now we're finally taking action. We're making some steps. But guess what? Some of the things that you may try, you might get annoyed with and disgusted with. Because I'm sure everyone has like, yeah, well, I tried this and I've got I applied for 1 million jobs and I'm still not getting anything. And then you could end up going back to stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 again. And then you've got the feelings involved with each of these steps. There is an element of trial and error to this that is really painful, I would say, but useful. So when I started looking for a job, I applied for, because each time I've done this, I applied for a gazillion jobs, didn't get anything, not even a whisper, and use that information to pivot my job search. So yes, it was difficult, but for instance, when I left a previous job and I had worked for the state, I had a high-level position in the state and I tried to get another job with the same state agency. Seemed to make sense that I should be able to do that. Got nowhere. Guess what? I was like, you know what? I guess I don't really want to work there anymore. I guess that's not happening for me, and that's okay. I could have decided to really spend a lot more time on the networking piece for that, but my intuition told me, my feelings were, you know what, maybe it's okay, because maybe deep down I didn't really want to work. There were things there I liked, things there I didn't like. It's okay to make that change. To me, being unemployed is sometimes felt like driving through a fog. Part of my foot was on the gas, but I might be going slow and I might be easing off and I might be taking a turn just because something I'm doing may not be working out. And when you're working with somebody, or you have a friend who's going through this, and if you have a partner who's working with you, they need to know how to support your perseverance. All of this is good, and you're gaining information. One of the things that I learned, I talked to somebody at a job that I applied for that I really wasn't all that concerned about getting. But I got an interview and I asked them questions and I said, can I ask you a few things now that we're done with this interview part? Yeah. How many applications did you get? 800 within a couple of days. Then we shut it down. Oh, okay. And how many people, I'm wondering about whether or not when you use the ATS systems to decide on resumes, would my resume have gotten through your system, or was it my connection that got me the interview? And she said, we did not interview a single person who did not have an existing connection to the company. No one. And part of me was kind of devastated, and I took, the job was paid really nothing. When I say really nothing, I'm not kidding around. And I've worked in nonprofit, believe me, I know what a nothing job payment means. That I know it, but the fact of the matter was, I then got over myself. Yes, and every single job I was applying for, I worked my network and worked it hard because I felt that if this is the name of the game, I don't like the game. I don't like the fact that you have to know somebody. I think it's terrible. I think it's, especially for women and people of color, it sucks because guess who's going to have the most connections? White males, typically. And there's prejudice against older folks. There's all these factors, but damn it, I've got to do this. And I have to get over myself. I'd like to think that somebody could look at my resume and think that I match. It doesn't matter because they were not going to look at my resume. So I had to get over myself and shift. And it was helpful feedback applying for a job I didn't even really want. Yeah, you got to know that you got to accept the system, whether you like it or not, Kathy. It is. I'm not going to change the system right now. I'd like to, but I have to work within the system and deal with it the way it is and let go of what I think it should be because I'm not in charge. I don't have that kind of influence. I have not found that in most companies, the people who are at the top, I know there are different feelings about this, and maybe not, the feeling at the top, the people at the top of the company are going to hire people who are most like them. And that's a challenge and a problem. How did I go about networking? Where did you go to network? Okay, so this is a fun. I did a lot of different things. I connected with people I have worked with, used to work with. I worked my LinkedIn. There were times that I didn't have a connection to a company that I was interested in, and I would just message someone from that company and just said, could you give me 5 minutes of your 10 minutes of time? I'm not looking for, I'm interested in your company, X, Y, and Z. And would you give me a few minutes of your time to talk to me? And a lot of times they didn't respond, but sometimes they did. And sometimes they then got to know me. And I learned a lot about the company that I didn't know. I also wanted to learn about the company culture. For those of us who've been laid off a few times and have worked for companies that had this lovely mission statement and all this razzmatazz, and then you find out, it's a nightmare or the company's miserable to work for. You won't find that. They won't tell you that in an informational interview if they don't know you, but you can get a feeling of their genuineness about how they feel about working there. And people offered to give me a recommendation who had never physically met me before, but I got the Zoom meeting with them and they were willing to help me. That helped tremendously. I did call on people that I knew who were colleagues. And I did everything I could possibly do to make the links that I needed to make. I had to get over my own self, as they say. I had to get over my own stuff because I don't like having to do that, but I forced myself. And I really, in those conversations, I try to draw them out instead of talking so much about me. So first, when I met with somebody, so tell me about your path and how you got to this company. And because that makes people feel that's their comfort zone. I didn't initially do this is who I am, blah, blah, blah. It eventually got to me, but I started with who they are. And then I try to find what we might have in common. Oh, really? You went to school there? Well, gee, I have a friend who went to school there, or some connection. Gee, you worked in public policy. I've worked in public policy. Wow, that's really so that there's a connection. Oh, I see you have kids, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it can be, that you now have something in common with that person can really be of help. And call on people, call in all your shits. This is your life. This is your future. And guess what? Someday they might be calling on you. And I have found that's such an interesting process, is to recognize that, someday I might be in a position where I'll help somebody, and sometimes I might have to be in the position of asking for the help, and it's all okay. So, and does anybody else have any? Yeah, people want to hire those John mentioned, who makes the hiring process in their job the easiest. And what's difficult to me is on a resume, there are pieces about a person that you cannot articulate that are really important parts of a human being. So, for instance, one woman I know, she put on her LinkedIn this whole thing about, I think she's like a mountain climber, okay? And she put on her LinkedIn her story about what she's learned through being a mountain climber and how that has impacted her career. Well, the beauty of that is she can't put that in a resume, but now all of her connecting people understand an aspect of her that powers her ability to get a job. They have an insight in her and her thought process that can actually really help them better understand her. And I think that those kind of pieces is a beauty of using LinkedIn, of what you could present pieces of yourself that are critical, that may not be on a resume and you cannot put on a resume, but help people to get to know you. So when you're, anybody have anything else? And yes,
So,
go ahead.
what I wanted to say, Janet, following on with what you're talking about, you needing help now and maybe you being the hand up next time. It's another reason for you guys to join our LinkedIn group. I'm going to put it in the chat. If you are not already a member, join, because there's over 4,000 people in that group. Well, there are like 16 people here in this meeting. So that tells you that probably most of the group is alumni, and they just haven't left us, thankfully. And so that gives you the ability to reach out to those people if you see a job at a company where you see that they're working. And if you don't know how to do that, when you go onto our page, up in the right-hand corner, there's a little box, and it'll be like show all. It's kind of hard to see, but you click on show all, and it takes you to a page that is everybody in the group. Unfortunately, you can't really filter. I can filter as the admin, but unfortunately, you guys can't. So it's going to show you everybody, not even in alphabetical order. It's like as they joined. So it will be a little bit of going through page after page and seeing, who works where and what title they have. But because you join a group and you're even if you're not first level connected, you are a second level connection. And in a group on that page, you can message somebody directly. I don't recommend messaging them and saying, hey, I'm in Launchpad. I see this job. Can you help me? But more like, hey, I'm currently in Launchpad Job Club. I see that you were in the club at one point. You work at XYZ company. I'm very interested in the company. Would you have about 15 minutes to chat, either a cup of coffee over Zoom, what have you? And so that is not just applicable to Launchpad, that is any group on LinkedIn that you belong to. So I just wanted to add that because I think that that's important, that you guys know that there is a support network out there. They're just not all in this room today because a lot of them are working. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one of the things that I've done is so I would definitely connect with everybody on LinkedIn, through LinkedIn, but then I would, once you connect with them, hopefully they'll accept your connection. Then you could go back to that company and see in that company who you're connected to. And in those cases, people have typically asked me, hey, do you have 10 minutes? I'd like to connect with you, blah, blah, blah. And there are times where I offered to meet with the person. Like one person wanted a job at the company I used to work at. And I said, yeah, would you like to meet? And they didn't. I think they wanted to, but they were nervous about it. And I would have given them a recommendation unless they did something terrible in the meeting. And they had that and they didn't use it. But most people are pretty happy to help each other. Everybody wants to feel like they're important and they can be helpful. So feel free to go back to the company. Once you've linked with that person and they're part of your network, it will show, if you go to the companies on LinkedIn, what connections you have at that company. And then I would go back to that person and say, hey, do you actually, sometimes they don't actually know anybody there, but sometimes they do. And that could be really helpful. Next slide. I know we're almost out of time. I'm going to have to just quickly go through.
You can go beyond 11:30.
Okay. Yes, it's a good point. Make sure you address them by their names, so they don't think you're a bot. Absolutely true. And not think that you're trying to sell them something. That's one of my problems. I get so many people that are trying to sell me something, even through my separate email address, which is just for job search. I get all sorts of junk mail. And it's an excellent point. So, when you're talking to friends and you're trying to figure out how to help each other, these are some ideas. Coping strategies, risks, what helps you cope, what helps you work through this. I like working on discrepancies, like where would you like to be, and what are your blockers? So where are you in your job search? Where do you want to be today, and what are the things that are inhibiting you, and what can we do about those blockers? What can we do to deal with them? And are there contradictions about where you are and what you want? Do you need are you in the wrong industry? Do you need to make some sort of major shift? This is a good time. It's kind of like, to me, this is like being a teenager again, thinking about your first job. The ugly thing about it is it's scary because it could be anything. You could be anything. How wonderful. Or you could be a complete failure in your mind. Okay. And the same way, this gives you a time where you could reinvent yourself in many different ways and be something different that maybe you have always wanted to be. With all of these possibilities can be very overwhelming, but they're exciting at the same time. And sometimes it's a really good time to reassess where do I really want to be? Do I really like doing what I did, or do I want to do something else? And how important is money to me? and why, and how important is security to me, and where do I get those things, and how much joy do I need to get at work? How much is important is that to me? We can go to the next slide. Okay, well, this is what I used myself, and I think it's good to use with a friend. So if there's a change you want to make, and maybe I want to spend more time. One of my goals is to spend 90% of my time on networking. And how ready am I for that change? And am I not ready at all? Am I somewhat ready? Or am I extremely ready? And then thinking through, well, maybe today I'm somewhat ready. What kinds of things would help me to get, I'm a 5. What's going to help me get to a 6? What's going to help me make that commitment and take those steps? What's in my way of getting to a 6? And why am I not a 4? Because that's a great thing to look at. Why am I where I am? Look at my success. Here I am. I'm not here. I'm not a 1. I am a 5. What got me to 5 will also help me figure out how to get to a 6. Being very concrete, we talked about goals and writing them down. Looking at this in a concrete way sometimes actually helps people to look at, am I really struggling with this whole change factor? Again, change is so scary to people and so threatening. It could be the best of times. It could be the best thing that happened in your life. And it could feel like the worst thing that could happen in your life. Change is always difficult for us to embrace. And we are dealing with all sorts of changes here. Next slide. There should be. Okay, so cost and benefits analysis of these different changes. So maybe an issue is I need to write down my goals every day. Is something that I'm thinking of. Okay, well, and I need to get my organize my stuff around unemployment and get myself to apply and all of that. What's the issue? What's the benefits of the change, and what's the benefits of not changing? Now, for instance, this is a little bit tricky, but it's really important. A lot of times, the reason that we are not making the change that we say that we want and that we intellectually know we want is because there are benefits of not changing that we have not articulated and we have not identified, and they're in the background because we haven't worked that through. Does that make sense? No?
Tremendous.
Okay, so good, thank you. So one of the benefits of not making a change, which may be challenging for us, is that while I'm not, maybe I want to apply for unemployment. I know I need to do it, right? But one of things of not changing is that then I have to feel like I'm asking for help, and that's hard for me. Asking for government help may be uncomfortable for me. I'm uncomfortable with filling out crappy forms. And then you could attack those things one at a time. But if you don't look at the benefits of not changing and not taking the steps, as well as the cost of not changing and not changing, then those things are in the background working on you. It's kind of like why your computer slows down. The background stuff that you don't identify can slow your process down. So that's why it's important to unpack, maybe it's not that important to me right now. I'm hoping to get a job is maybe a thing reason, and I'm thinking it's not going to be necessary. All of these things are important to identify.
Sometimes if change is hard, you can just set a small time frame and say, I'm going to try to do this change for a week,
Mhm.
and then see how it feels, see how it goes. The fact that you've done it for a short period of time is a success, and then you can analyze it and see if it makes sense to continue with that change, or to ditch it and go back to something else.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Giving yourself some, writing down your goal, making it as concrete as you can, it can be really helpful to a lot of times. And then giving yourself a time frame, I think, can be extremely helpful. Yeah, I'm going to do this for a while. Just like, I applied for a gazillion of one type of job for a while, and then I switched gears. And then I had to do a reassessment. But giving yourself deadlines and having that calendar can be really helpful, because then you're looking at it. The reason we do this whole thing of writing it down is to make it concrete to us, because it's not hidden from us anymore, which is a lot of the reasons why we put it on a calendar and we write stuff down. It's to make it concrete, and whichever way you need to do that. Sometimes things that might be challenging might be important. Maybe it's not that important to me right now. I think I could ride this out, and I don't really need to do this right now. I've had job seekers tell me that they got so worried about making the wrong decision and choosing the wrong job that they were not actively looking for work. And that became a big challenge for them. Being able to having the confidence, how confident are you? Maybe that's a challenge. Maybe, you don't think you could do it. And so so what do we need to build that confidence? What do we need to build our willingness? We know that we need to make this change. What do we need to work on to address it? What are our blockers, and how do we get rid of them? That's how we're going to make ourselves build our motivation and build our sense of success. So if you're working with somebody who is struggling, and you've got a friend who's helping, you're helping in this job search, it's important to roll with their resistance. It's part of the process. And of course, it's important not to be the fixer. I've made that mistake. Even though I know all this, I've made that mistake, and I've jumped to a place where that person wasn't. That is not necessarily helpful. That could shut the person down. If the person asks for information or resources, great, but don't assume that that person doesn't necessarily know what to do. Sometimes it's that they're struggling with how to make themselves do this. Help the person find the answers within themselves. Yeah, if they want information, it's great, but sometimes this motivation and this process, sometimes the answers lie within, and it's a matter of you're helping them to build their sense of self-efficacy, that they know that they can do this, and they can believe in themselves and believe in the possibility of this change. Just knowing that, having that confidence is extremely powerful. Making sure you emphasize strengths, identifying your strengths. What are your strengths? What has worked for you in the past? What helps you? What keeps you motivated? What helped you in school? Go back to when you were a kid. Those are the most telling parts of your life, because they're the least edited. What kept you going when you went through a hard time when you were 10? Those things really can be very helpful. Talking through that, affirming any kind of effort, any kind of progress is extremely helpful. And then kind of pulling it together. Well, gee, here's where we started. When I've met you, you were doing X, and now, you've made all this. But now you're doing this, and you're going forward, and then you're really helping them to kind of hear their own progress, and being able to reflect on their progress, even though they may be very down on themselves. So externally, I might be down on myself, and what I would articulate if you told me all this would be, well, yeah, but I haven't done X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean I don't hear it. It just means that it's hard for me to reflect on it out loud. Doesn't mean I'm not doing some internal reflection on it. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So when you're helping each other, these are really, I find these things helpful. These things helped me when I was looking for a job and I was leaning on my friends.
You know,
Um,
but can I throw something in there real quick?
Please.
Because I've run into this exact thing with a lot myself and with other people, where sometimes as well, because the focus on what things mean to the individual, and but the answer really is there most of the time. One of the things I did in a workshop on self concept by Damon Card, which I recommend strongly. And it's the initial one's free, but it's really great stuff. But he we went through a values summary. We figured out exactly what it is that I value. And I thought, well, I figured out in my career, I value freedom. So I identified with what Ahmed said earlier. And
Mhm.
but here's the problem. What I consider freedom is not what some other people consider freedom. Because when I talked to my girlfriend about what freedom is, she went, oh, that doesn't sound good. You like that? And I had people say, oh, well, then you want to be unemployed because that then you have all the time in the world. No, what freedom is exactly what we talked about earlier for me. And that is the ability to do the things I want to do, to be able to know that I've got the future figured out. I know that I've got my finances figured out. But that's what it is to me. And if somebody else asks me, hey, I really need some help on this because I'm struggling with this, and they say to me, you know what I really want is freedom. I'd say, oh, well, you've just nailed that, buddy. You just got it. So I really love that point about understanding what it means to you, as well as what's the cost, what's the benefit to me, because most people don't think about that. Like in a situation where they're struggling to find a job, what really are they getting out of that? Is there something that some part of them's not been nurtured, not been developed, that it's saying, let's just put this off a little bit more. Let's not make that call. Let's not put that
Mhm.
application in because there's this one little thing I need. And just to get really honest with ourselves. I really appreciate where you're going with that, Janet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an excellent point that my definition, and that's why it's so important to be a good listener and not jump the gun on people, is, your job, if you're supporting somebody, you want to just start like using reflective language and just reflect back their words to them. And so that they feel heard. One of the things that's so hard about this is the isolation and just feeling like you're not understood, like being shut down. Well, that's what your idea of freedom is? Well, that means you don't want a job. Like that is that can be really a shutdown for people. So when you use reflective language and you paraphrase, gee, it sounds like you're looking, you want somebody, everybody wants to be heard and understood. And sometimes just hearing my own words out loud clued me into what I was really experiencing. So, I would say something like, I feel like I'm trapped. And someone going back to me saying, or I feel hopeless. That was one of the things I definitely felt. And when they said, so I hear that you're feeling hopeless, even though it may seem hard to understand, just hearing them say that they really heard what I said. They didn't say, why do you feel hopeless? You shouldn't feel hopeless. I wasn't being judged by that, by expressing that. Hearing that and allowing them with them expressing that, it allowed me to process it. And it allowed me to ask myself, why do I feel hopeless and what can I do about that? Rather than that person just trying to solve my problem. So I think it can be really powerful because this is such an isolating experience. So I've talked a little bit about reflective listening and why it's important. It clarifies thoughts, helps you explore your feelings, and then it helps you determine your actions, helps you feel understood, and it helps you feel respected. Most of us feel disrespected when we lose our jobs. It's demoralizing. It's hurtful. Or even when we leave a job that we want to leave. Like I've left jobs, and because I left the job because I was so disappointed in the job. there's still a loss there, whether it's a layoff or whether it's being fired or whether you just leave on your own. So making sure that you're, there for the other person really helps, and surrounding yourself with people who are supportive of you helps, and minimizing your time with people who are going to not be supportive of you also really helps. I made sure I intentionally stayed away from anyone that were gonna bring me down, because I did not have time for that. I didn't have the emotional energy. And that was the one thing that I thought helped a lot for me, was really being conscious of my energy, my emotional energy level, and where I was placing my energy, because I felt like I didn't have, my cup wasn't completely full, and it certainly wasn't running over in energy because it was so hard. And you're dealing with stuff that is really difficult and scary. I've got a family to support. I've got 2 kids to support. I've got college expenses. Losing a job under that was terrifying to me. And it wasn't just about me. That was very hard for me. It was about my feeling like I let my family down. And that was really challenging. So I needed to really make sure that I put my energy and stayed with people who were just going to be helping me and building my energy, and minimize any time I have with anyone who's going to bring me down, because I didn't have time for that. Does anyone have, that's basically it. I just have one more little slide if you could switch to. Some of the concepts I brought in today was from a concept called motivational interviewing. It is just now being utilized. It's a counseling technique that's used in a lot of different places, but it is now just being utilized with job seekers. But I thought it had a lot to offer, as well as looking at the aspects of grief and really looking at where you are with that. I think that it can be really helpful. I also wanted to mention, as a resource for people, is Austin Integral Care. They have a hotline for anyone who needs emotional support. This is a very hard process, and it's okay to seek them out. I happen to know people who work their hotline who are amazing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're just desperate or blah, blah, and whatever. They are there for you. There's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline for folks who just need someone to help them. And they also can connect people with mental health services, medical services, and there are many other nonprofits that are also could be helpful as well. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or follow-up. And that's all I have for now. I am with a newly hired executive director at a nonprofit, but I'm not allowed to talk about said nonprofit yet because they haven't announced it to everyone. And I've made a career pivot that I over and over again that it's just exciting to me. And never did I think when I did, this has been, just doing this whole process has been really interesting. I did not expect to have a job by the time I gave this. Did not expect to lose a job when I started writing this. Life is filled with surprises, some good, some horrible, some not expected. But I guess we have to figure out how to expect the unexpected. Oh, one of my, this is something I will suggest. One of my resolutions that I did keep, the only resolution I could ever say that I kept in my life was minimizing looking at news during the day, because there's so much bad news often, and we're just inundated, and and putting that to a certain time of day that I'll look at it, and I read it instead of watching it, because that helps me. And when I was looking for a job, doing anything I could to not bring myself down further was extremely important for me. Does anyone have any questions? I know we've gone over time. I appreciate your patience.
I have one comment that I'd like to make about networking. When you network, when you find somebody that will help you, make sure you keep them in your loop. I used to hear all the time from people who said, I talked to that person that you connected me with, and I never heard back from them afterwards. Did they ever find a job? People that take time to talk with you do want to know what becomes of you. They need to become a part of your network, that you keep informed of your progress. And if you still are looking for a job, and you give a little update, and you say, hey, all of you helped me in some way in my job search. I just wanted to give you an update on my progress. I've had 15 interviews with these companies. I was overqualified for these jobs, underqualified for those jobs. My new target companies are these, in case you're comfortable introducing me to somebody there, blah, blah, blah. But after you go to work, you definitely need to say, and even if you didn't have time to reach out and take advantage of their offer, you need to say, listen, I found a job, but I want to thank you so much for your willingness to talk with me. And so that sort of thing. Because if you don't, then you kind of might damage things for the next person coming along who also gets connected to those people. So keep everybody, be polite, courteous. Here's what's happened. Thank you so much for your help, blah, 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 blah. I think the thing about not looking at news is great for all of us. It's so sad.
Yeah, I think that's an important, because everybody wants to be part of your success. And when you feel like you're part of somebody's success, you're part of their journey, and that makes them feel good about themselves. And it's hard to do when you get a job, because you're suddenly inundated with all these new things. And I'm guilty of not doing it as well as I would like, as well as going back to my network. I try to get to all these people. And some people I can't announce my job to. So, but it is really helpful to go back and thank them and let them know that you're employed now. Yeah.